A big thank you to MPB for sponsoring today's video. Welcome back to Framelines. Let's talk about motivation in street photography. So we always, I guess, chat privately about motivation, what we're doing project-wise. And I thought we'd share some of our thoughts on like how to keep motivated on street photography, especially when you've been doing it for like a number of years, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's something we talk about privately a lot, about, falling in and out of love with street photography. And just like going through phases of not really being that interested in going into town and doing street photography in the same locations we're sort of used to doing it. And then for absolutely no reason, it all just changes and you get back into it again.
Like obviously the more you do it, the better your photos will be. But also like it's taken me a long time to realize that you don't have to do it all the time. Like you can have breaks from it. You can be more introspective. You can just take time to look at books and documentaries and get inspiration.
I think you hear this a lot, that you just have to force yourself to do it, right? You have to do it whether you're in the mood or not, and you have to go in and just do it and put in the time and put in the hours. But I've done that sometimes, and I've done it for months on end. And I just look back at the photos and I can tell I'm not into it. Do you ever get that?
Yeah. There's also, I think, times when I go out when I'm like, even on the train there, that I know I'm not in the right mindset or I have the right attitude and I'm just not going to get anything because I'm like, I've already written it off, like in a way, like and I'll go out for maybe 2 or 3 hours. And I probably won't even look at the photos I've taken when I get home. Yeah, but I think that's part of it. Like you can't always be absolutely pumped and full of energy, can you? Like,
I think the only times like when I am absolutely pumped is when I go somewhere totally new. Or if I travel somewhere, or if it's like the first time I'm in a city, and I'm just sort of exploring a city as anyone would, in like the first time in a new place, and everything's new, and there's like just new visuals and a new culture and a new way of living. I think that's really exciting, and that it's hard not to be motivated when you're in that sort of space. But when you're like, I've been in London for 6 years, and you've been in London for much longer. Yeah, you probably were tired of London long before I was, really.
I don't know. I think I lived in London for maybe nearly 10 years before I even started taking street photos, and almost like street photography made me like appreciate the city a whole much more than I did before, to the point where I think like pre-taking street photographs I probably could have happily left London, to be honest. Whereas now I feel much more connected to it. However, I do feel like it has changed dramatically since COVID. Like I know we both almost have this like rose-tinted view of our photos from 2019. Like that was our heyday in a way.
Yeah, the good old days.
Yeah. It's embarrassing, isn't it?
I know, because it was 2019, like a couple of years ago. It's not like back in the 70s or anything, but it did seem like a very different place, or I guess our attitudes were very different to the city at the time.
Yeah, I feel like there was a different energy. Obviously, lots of places have closed now. It feels much quieter now to me. Again, I don't know if it's like psychosomatic, but it does feel quieter. It feels like...
I don't think it does. Yeah, I think it's like I've been on Oxford Street recently and it's just as busy.
Okay.
Yeah, I think... Yeah, I don't know. That's how I kind of see it. But I did notice that like with you... After the first couple of lockdowns, you started shooting a lot of stuff locally, and that was some stuff that was in your photography before COVID, but you got way more interested in it then.
I don't even know if it's just like a necessity. I think when like it's just going out, to me the action of going out with a camera is the fun part. It's kind of like sometimes it's often less about what I actually get. There's all the actual photo at the end is kind of incidental. The actual act of doing it is quite fun. I don't know. I know you don't really quite agree with that, do you? I mean, obviously you prefer like the whole package. Like you want to get something in the end of it, I guess, right?
Yeah, I do like to get something, but like lately I've just been, just going on walks again, like just around Walthamstow where I just moved, and like just going around the park here, and like taking photographs of like a nice pool of light and some leaves, and they've got pear trees around here in the local park. And it's just so odd seeing like pear trees and like bruised fruit everywhere, and you see people scrumping for fruit in a local park.
When you look at like Instagram and social media, I've had this thought a lot. Like, sort of look at other people taking street photographs in London, and I think about going and taking photographs myself, and I'm like, I had this thought of like, what am I even adding to this?
I get that. Yeah, I thought about that just looking back at my own photos. I'm like, over the last year, this is what I've taken in London. If I go in there again, am I really going to get anything, like you said, that's adding to this, or anything new? Or
I feel like I go and recreate photos I've taken in the past, which in themselves are heavily influenced and often slight recreations of famous street photographers from years ago.
Yeah, I guess like the hard part is that it's not really in our control. So it's just like making yourself going in and doing it. And then occasionally you just get surprised with something good, and you can't control that at all.
I guess what we're trying to get at is how to be motivated to keep doing that, isn't it? That's what we're trying to say. Like,
yeah, maybe you shouldn't always be motivated, right? Maybe you should like go through phases where you question it and you start thinking that like, yeah, maybe this isn't good enough. And maybe that's what makes you change and challenges you. And maybe it's all part of the whole process.
Like maybe if you were just constantly motivated, maybe that's just not natural.
Yeah. Well, if you're constantly motivated, maybe you're just sort of like self-satisfied with your own work and you're never really growing. Maybe.
Yeah. Maybe. Like, yeah, that's true. To be constantly motivated, I would have to be constantly happy with my own work, which would most likely mean it's terrible. Right?
Yeah, or at least like you're just not doing something new. You're just like you've got a fixed idea of what you want to get like every time you go out there, and maybe that's not a good way to do it.
Or maybe they're just happy people.
Bastards.
Just jumping in to thank our sponsor for today's video, MPB. Shane and I have personally been using MPB for a number of years now. Whenever we want to buy or sell any camera gear, we go straight to mpb.com. I never actually consider buying a new camera these days. I always go straight to MPB and buy used. Definitely the best way to go. If you're looking for a quote for some of your old gear or you're looking to change up your camera system, please visit mpb.com. I used to have it when I first started getting really into street photography, where I would like every time I would go out maybe 3 or 4 times a week, and every time I went out, I'd say the first hour I'd have this thought of like, well, I've clearly forgotten how to do it, and then maybe take like 10 15 shots and be like, oh yeah, I'd have to like almost like warm myself into it every time I give myself a little pep talk, like, you can do it, you haven't forgotten.
It's funny when that moment changes, right? Like when you're out there and you feel like you don't really know what you're doing, but then just something happens, and it's just out of your control.
Yeah, you get to a point when you're like, oh, I do know how to take a photo, and you have that confidence in the back of your mind. You're like, but that took probably about 4 years for me to get to that point. I think maybe 4 years, 5 years. I don't know.
That's probably a good thing though, because at least it means you're like doing some kind of analysis of your own, or being like self-critical. I think that's really important.
Have you had that thought process as well, or was that, I don't know?
Yeah, I do know that like when even now it takes me ages to warm up, and sometimes I don't warm up at all. Like I'll go out and I'll just I think it was a lot harder when I was shooting film. Like I remember going around with the Mamiya 645, and it's a big heavy camera, and sometimes I'd make myself go into town with it, and I just like I'd walk around for 2 hours and I wouldn't take a single photo. I just like couldn't get into it. Maybe it's because with film you're afraid of the expense, so you never really like, maybe it's harder to warm up
as well. I find like if I maybe get a shot early on in the day that's like not really shit, I'll be like, oh yeah, that will like the motivation of taking that shot will like see me through. I think about momentum a lot. Like you get that initial boost of confidence, and then you can maybe be a bit more bullish when be a bit more confident when taking photos. You know, you get that initial boost where you're like, okay, yeah, this one's come together. I can like I'd maybe take a photo on the tube that might be that require a bit more confidence that maybe I wouldn't have at like this earlier on in the day if I hadn't got a good photo as well. Do you ever? I really want to get over that. Like almost like I keep thinking about how to like start the day with that confidence. Like it doesn't like it wouldn't want. I don't want it to have to take me getting an okay shot to be able to have that self-belief. Just
Yeah, it'd be good to be able to have that momentum over weeks instead of having to build it up every time you go out. Maybe that comes from like having a series or something, like something you're working on and you've got a fixed idea of what it should be.
Yeah, whereas street photography in its nature is random every time. It's like starting from scratch every time you go out.
Yeah. Do we have any practical tips whatsoever on how to keep motivated, or is it really just fucking do it? Just get out there and just, even if you feel bad about it, do it, or don't do it.
Well,
that's our advice.
I'm hoping maybe us openly talking about our experience with it will be like good for people to hear, so they know it's natural to have these thoughts that we do.
Yeah, that's true. Like I know, like you could give the impression from like posting on Instagram and posting every day that like you're just out there getting like photos that you're happy with all the time. But yeah, for me, it's not like that at all. Like sometimes I'll go like digging deep into the archives to find something to post because I haven't shot anything in weeks.
Yeah, I do that all the time. I'm bad for reposting. It's like, what's even the motivation behind that? Ego? Like, what?
I feel okay with it. Like right now, I don't think I'm very motivated to do that sort of daily street photography thing. But I'm okay with it because I guess in the back of my mind, I figure I want to find something first and build something out of that, like build a series up. Maybe like part of street photography is really just like, some of it's just sitting in your fucking armchair thinking about your work. I think, yeah, the only advice I would give to anyone is just go somewhere new. If you're feeling unmotivated, I know that that's one of the things I try that's fairly reliable. Even if it's just somewhere new within the town you live in, even if it's a small town, just like try a different street, try a different perspective on a street or something like that. That usually helps at least.
Just that's the biggest thing, isn't it? Like somewhere unfamiliar, exploring somewhere unfamiliar with a camera can't be beaten, really, can it? And if the light's good,
yeah, I think it's the best thing. What do you think about gear? Like, do you find yourself? I think it's a very short-term thing with gear. So I know I'll end up like deciding that, okay, I need this new lens and that's going to keep me motivated. But then I'll have a new lens for like 2 weeks or something and I'm just back to where I started. Do you find that?
in some instances, yes. But obviously, I mean, anybody watching the channel will know we've chopped and changed gear like an embarrassing amount. But there have been times where like a piece of gear has the whole, like the purpose of that camera has been served a purpose for like the photographs I've been taking at that time, and it has become quite like I've been shooting a lot with the Fuji GFX the last 3 or 4 months, and that has been I don't want to say game changing, but it's definitely changed the way I think about taking photographs in a new way, and it's been very motivating in that just the aspect ratio, the depth of field, the compression, the form factor of it, the manual dials and everything. That has been, of all the gear I've probably bought in the last few years, that has been. But those instances where that's happened has been few and far between. Primarily, it has just been trying a new lens, using it for a week, selling it. I think the GFX and when I first got the Leica Q, those are the only 2 instances I can think where gear has actually changed up the way I take photos.
Yeah, I've had the same thing with the 6D, the trusty old Canon 6D, which I have here. I still use. I've got this tiny pancake 40mm lens on it. Still use it every day. And when I got that, I remember getting it around November, and I used it straight through November to like June the following year. Every day, just loved it. And it just felt like something changed, and I wasn't thinking about gear anymore, and I just wanted to, get photos.
That's it, isn't it? When you find a piece of kit that stops you thinking about gear as well, try somewhere new. Just be aware that it's okay to go through waves of not being motivated. Buy Framelines magazine for starters. If you haven't, yeah.
Well, I know the best way to stay motivated is with a copy of Framelines magazine. Issue 3 now available at frame-lines.com. And it's just full of inspiring photography. I don't know. I'm kind of, at this stage, I'm used to having phases. And I'm used to going for a couple of weeks without doing it and then getting back into it. So I feel like I'm not really that interested right now, but I know I will be in a couple of weeks. Do you go through phases like that?
I find it's gonna 100%. Especially since I've been shooting the same area for the last 3 years, really, as well. So I haven't until last week I went to Margate for a bit. I haven't really travelled all that much as well. So it's been tough going out doing the same walk day in, day out, and it has been hard to stay motivated. And sometimes even the smallest thing, like changing the weather or the season, can be the thing that motivates me for a bit. I think ultimately it just comes down to it just feels weird to leave the house without a camera. So it's just that's in itself is a motivation. Like just walking with a camera, that's like being motivated to do that. I think just for me, it's almost like stripping it down to that really simple, just the excitement of the possibility. Like I'm outside with a camera, because I've had instances where I remember during one of the lockdowns, I was really down about hadn't taken anything in ages, and I went out one morning and then 5 swans flew over my head, and I had my D850 ready, and I just got this it's not a street photo, but I was the satisfaction of taking that photo sustained me for quite a long time.
I'm at we have a garden now, we just moved, and every time I go out the garden, I take my camera with me, because something's a bird will fly by, or there'll be some squirrels, or a nice patch of light or something. Yeah, I take my camera with me everywhere. So I don't think I'm demotivated when it comes to photography in general.
Just street photography.
Just street photography, I think. But I know I'll get back into it. So if you're watching this, how do you feel about being motivated for street photography? Do you think you go through phases yourself, and it's natural for it to go through phases like that? Do you have any recommendations for what you do for motivating yourself? Do you actually find Framelines as a motivator, as inspiration, or just photo books in general as inspiration? Yeah, we're just doing these sorts of videos where we have a chat every now and again. This is a topic that we talk about a lot anyway, so we figured we'd have a go at making a video about it. So yeah.
Thank you for listening.
Take care, and see you next time.
Take care.